LinkedIn, unfortunately, is a slop factory in many ways. First, it might not seem like it's a big thing, but then suddenly, whoop, there's the alarm bells ringing for everybody. There's no new ideas in slop. New ideas comes from the unexpected places where the slop is maybe not looking. Not every great idea is a good idea. If I've got, an amazing idea for an app, but it's also a flying car, and it also, helps make, delicious banana smoothies or whatever. If I plug that into Claude or certainly to ChatGPT, it's going to give me a, hey, let's start, let's do it.
Well, hello, you delicious, delicious creatures. Thank you for joining us again this week for another of our experiments in artificial intelligence shows. So this week we are going to be chatting to Alex Searle, and we're talking about slop. But what we want to know is, what do you think? What do you think slop is? Let us know in the comments what you think. And also let us know where you're joining from. I am here in London, as always. And although last week I was in New York, so not always in London. But I want to know where you're joining from, because I'm here, but Alex is joining us from somewhere really quite exotic. And when you'll see his background, you will see how exotic that is. So here we go. We're going to kick into this topic right away, because this is a beauty. This is a real beezer of a topic that we're covering here. And there are a lot of people who have got very strong opinions on this. And we want to talk about it because I think that slop is a lot more than just this phrase. It was one of the phrases of last year, made it into the dictionary. But it's more than that. We want to talk about the ramifications of it, what it means for business, what it means for people as humans. We can see people coming in here at the moment. Fantastic. We've got Kim in Denmark. Hi, Kim. Thank you for joining us. David Hunter. Hello, David, in Denver. Brendan, South Africa. LinkedIn user, it says. Ontario, Canada. So somebody's got a security setting there. Oh, fantastic. San Diego, Chicago, Barcelona. Hello from Atlanta. Great. So we've got lots of folk joining us already. That's brilliant. We really want you to be alive in the comments. I'm going to be keeping an eye on what you are saying. Great. Vancouver here. I'm going to be keeping an eye on what you're saying, and we want your questions so that we will do our best to answer them. So let's just kick this off. Let's get into it. And I think I go to this tab here. I'm going to give you an introduction to Alex, except I'm not going to give the introduction to Alex, because the way that we do this is we get AI to do a sarcastic and not very flattering introduction to our guests every week. And here we go. This is a slightly pompous music I've added to this. Let's see what we think.
Oh, brace yourselves. Alex Searle is here, the fearless leader who's on a mission to stop your team from having a meltdown every time you update the software. Yes, after 4 entrepreneurial escapades, because clearly he just loves a challenge, he's here to ensure you adopt new tech without losing your precious human touch. Founder of Humble Mind, because let's face it, someone had to be, he's here to make sure your team stays connected while everything around them goes digital. So let's give a warm, slightly bemused welcome to the guy making sure you don't lose your mind or your humanity while adopting tech, Alex Searle.
There we go, Alex. Hello.
Brilliant. That's good.
Now, put sort of pompous music. Do you want to hear the other version? I put some different music. I'll play a little bit of this one. This is a different version of the intro with it's maybe more your kind of thing.
Brace yourselves. Alex Searle is here, the fearless leader who's on a mission to stop your team from having a meltdown every time you update the software. Yes, after 4...
Yeah, that's for the kids. Bo. So, Alex, we've got an interesting background there. That is not a virtual background. Could you tell us where you're joining from?
Yes, I am currently in Norway. No, I'm joking. No, I am in Costa Rica. I'm in Costa Rica. I'm joining you from Costa Rica here. I've got this amazing view. I won't turn it around just because I don't want to offend anybody, but I've got this amazing view of looking over the Pacific. Yeah, sitting comfortably here with my podcast set up.
My goodness. And what are you doing in Costa Rica?
Well, I'm working remotely, running my businesses, keeping the lights on, doing everything as usual. And we've decided to take an adventure year this year with my family. I've got 3 kids, 3 little chickens, and we found an amazing school for them here where we are. But also we wanted to, just get out a little bit from our normal home in Spain, where we've been for the last sort of 7 years. And we're loving it. We've just come here, actually. We've only been here for 3 weeks. So
Wow.
we'll be here for the next little while. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Well, that's definitely not a sloppy thing to do. That's absolutely amazing. I'm slightly envious of you being able to have like an international life like
You're
that.
always welcome. Yeah.
Right, I'm booking a flight right after this show's done. Brilliant! I'll be coming over. So let's kick off this discussion about slop, because we can see in the comments we've got a whole bunch of people joining us here. Tell us, what do you think slop is? What's your take on it?
Yeah. I wrote an article about a week or 2 ago, actually, on my newsletter. I called it the slop-a-demic survival guide. And it really does feel in a way like it the metaphor stands in terms of a sort of a health emergency, where at first it might not seem like it's a big thing, but then suddenly, boop, there's the alarm bells kind of coming, coming ringing for everybody. And I think that the interesting thing about all this, if we're talking about slop, usually the definition for slop is that kind of beige, gray prison food kind of cafeteria that is made in batches, most of the time made without love, cheap ingredients, and it kind of just gets slopped on your plate. It comes from the verb to be slopped, right? And so it kind of it feels like that. I suppose the only difference here is that when we're talking about AI slop, most of the time on face value, the slop is actually not bad. It's not too bad. And I think that is what really makes the problem kind of difficult and insidious in a way to really solve, because it's not like it's 3-year-old level content that we're seeing, right? It's being trained on us. It's being trained on what we've been talking to it and what it's been exposed to over the internet and all of that. So naturally, it will reflect, I suppose, the best and the worst. But it also means that to put a LinkedIn post together, to put a book proposal together, to put together a good article that has done the research, all of that, compared with the amount of time that it would normally take to do that before 2022, OpenAI, ChatGPT, on balance, there's a lot of good things that we get from it, even if it is slop, even if it is. So my kind of opening remark here is that slop is difficult to sort of, catch in a way, because a lot of the time it's not terrible. And that is what kind of contributes to this problem, because it's all kind of vanilla, but it's vanilla in a sort of a mostly quite usable way.
So there's kind of a way that I look at slop is when we sort of look at, let me see if I can find something here that will be that I can use. All right, I'm going to pick up this poll. This poll here is going to be, this is adequacy. And AI tends to produce adequacy. And what happens is when people have got 0 skills, you go to AI and they get adequacy. But anyone that's got higher skills and have developed judgment over the years, and this is the people who have, like, for example, somebody who could be a video editor, and that they might have spent 20 years developing this skill, understanding the software, getting good, looking at stuff that's good, discussing with their colleagues what makes it good, and developing a really refined taste and judgment. These people are then up here looking down at this and going, that is terrible. I would never let that go because my quality standard is up here. But people who don't have that level of judgment, that level of skill, are looking up at this and going, this is amazing. I'm going to let that go. And it's like it is this thing where it's adequacy that we're getting with
Mm.
slop. We're not saying it's terrible. We're saying it's stuff that's just but people are using it for the wrong reasons because they don't have the taste and they don't have the judgment.
Mm.
So like I'm finding like on LinkedIn, people are posting stuff that it looks like an article, but it just isn't any good.
Mm.
But they're still getting lots of likes, which is the thing that I find really bizarre. So do you think that the audience, the people who are actually liking and responding to this, have got a responsibility as well as the creators?
I think so, for sure. I think it's always a two-way street. A lot of the time, though, perhaps some of that accountability is missing because a lot of the people in the audience might be doing exactly the same thing. And
Yeah.
so, might not want to rat each other out in that particular way or, but yeah, I mean, I totally agree with the metaphor there, where it kind of makes the substandard instantly possible or adequate, and there's a real kind of very fast, almost costless experience to doing that, to suddenly finding the right word, to suddenly, making it seem like, yeah, okay, that's possible. Um, but then there's also something to be said about that, the fact that an editor, an artist, perhaps someone who has honed their craft for 20, 25 years, it's easy for them to go, oh, no, that's not good. And that comes from that sense of taste and judgment and the kinds of things that are really not, I wouldn't say they're not teachable, but they're harder won skills and
Yes.
sensibilities. And there are these sorts of affinities and things that really, I think, come from life experience and lived experience and the kinds of things that are difficult to replicate because it's your perspective. It's your way of seeing things. You decided to go backpacking in the Balkans when you were in your 20s and make some terrible decisions and lost your money. All of those things influence the person who you are today and how you show up when you write something, and how that then, I think, still helps to elevate you from a lot of the slop, which is really just reformatting and refactoring everything else. There's no new ideas in slop. New ideas comes from the unexpected places where
Yeah.
the slop is maybe not looking. So there's a real premium there, and there's a real premium on doubling down and going deeply into that life experience and those kind of curious perspectives that I think are only going to become more of a human premium as we go. Because I don't think slop's going anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I
Here to
was I
stay.
was actually going to ask there. Do you think that this is? I don't think it's going anywhere, but I think it might abate slightly. I've got this kind of opinion that it's we're on a seesaw here, and what's happened is that for people to be able to produce things like pieces of film, writing, images, people haven't had the skills and ability to do that. And at the moment, suddenly they get it, and everyone's rushing at this.
Yeah.
And I think that is maybe we've got that everyone rushing at something new, and that it will start, the seesaw will start to balance itself out, and hopefully we'll see less slop as time goes on. But the other side of that is the more that people are exposed to slop, I believe it's going to drop people's standards, and people are going to accept crappier stuff.
Yes.
And that's something that concerns me.
Yeah, same. And interestingly enough, when we're talking about slop here, we're kind of thinking about the, in a broad sense, the content outputs, the stuff we see on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, unfortunately, is a slop factory in many ways.
Yeah.
But it also comes to a lot of the other stuff that generative AI is being used for, whether it's, videos or, these kind of like, quick makeshift podcasts or whatever. And once again, they're not bad. They're adequate. They're not bad. Sometimes they can be quite good. But I find the real kind of slop factor doesn't come at the end of what is produced as an output. I find the real crime committed, if you like, happens at the beginning. And that's where I am sitting in front of my PC, in front of ChatGPT or HeyGen or anything, and I've got an idea. And I've coming to this tool or this piece of software with a kernel, and the real problem, or the kind of the first issue here, which then degenerates into slop, is that too quickly I'm willing to kind of almost like give way about my idea to AI, especially if I'm sparring with it, especially if I'm trying to, okay, what do I want to do with this? Ask me some questions to clarify what I want to do. And too quickly, I'll just go, yeah, that sounds good. Let's do that. Rather
Yeah.
than trying to refine more deeply. This is actually what I really want to do. This is an idea that I've got. Here's some ways that I'd like to be challenged on it potentially. Some of this is just down to good old prompt engineering and just being able to work with it in a smart way, but also something where it can develop the kernel to make it better rather than just almost push you back down to the vanilla mean. And that's the real the route to fix, I think.
I think, yeah, and I think that Brendan here is agreeing with you in this comment here. You know, judgment is part of it, but does it not also come down to taking AI's results for granted, stroke laziness, as you're saying, and a lack of proofing and fact checking before hitting publish send, which I think is absolutely right. But I think as part of that, we then have to ask, why is it? Why do we have this issue? You know, how did we get here? And I think that, like, one of the issues that we have is, you know, for the last, people started saying about 10 years ago, content is king, as if that was what it was all about, was generating stuff, creating stuff to put out there. And I think that AI has accelerated that to the level where the priority is to get stuff out rather than to produce good stuff.
Yes, precisely. I think it's down to the idea of friction, and you can put it down to it in a kind of a phrase I like to sometimes use, which is not every great idea is a good idea, which means that if I've got, you know, an amazing idea for an app, but it's also a flying car, and it also, you know, helps make, you know, delicious banana smoothies or whatever, you know, chances are, if I plug that into Claude or certainly into ChatGPT, it's going to give me a, hey, let's start. Let's do it. What, you know, wow. How did you come up with this? You're such an innovator. What a great idea, Alex. Whereas the kind of the necessary process, which comes from human beings, of being able to refine and put in the kind of the necessary friction and the breaks and the testing and the sort of the rethinking of something at that early stage is so integral to making sure that the good ideas come out where they need to and the bad ideas get stopped in their infancy, hopefully. And I think that's part of it. And because of that, because we're kind of in this age and content is king, and we've kind of been the product of a lot of these sort of forces, I think that we're in an age of also kind of this real hyper convenience where we don't like friction. We don't want to put up with it. We just want, you know, 10 LinkedIn posts that sound amazing right now. I don't want to wait for it. I don't want to have to bother with giving you a longer brief or more context. I just want it immediately, and I want it great. Thanks. Without, you know, going into the necessary sort of level of effort and friction to make it better than what it might be right on the outset. And that's where the sort of the slop-a-demic, I think, really gets its roots.
Yeah, and I've got to agree with that. And I mean, as you're saying about friction. This book that I wrote with my friend Sun before AI came around actually talks about this kind of stuff that you're talking about, the importance of friction as part of our processes. And too many people are trying to take shortcuts, and those shortcuts lead to a drop in quality. There's a comment here. It says LinkedIn user, but I think it's my friend Bonnie. The other possibility is that people will recognize slop and stop reading more quickly, just like people now stop reading a novel if the first page doesn't grab them, or watching one episode in a new series and stop watching. Do you think that there's behavioral issues that we might see from this in how people consume content because of this slop-a-demic?
Totally. And that comment there from Bonnie, if it is Bonnie, reminds me of a quote that a friend of mine, Rich Mulholland, shared with me earlier this week, which comes from Seth Godin. And he was talking about books and reading books. And he said, you know, I'm the kind of person who reads a book until I get the joke, you know, and then I sort of put it down, you know, until you sort of get it. And I think a lot of people do that, maybe specifically in a particular type of genre, you know, if it's self-help or business books, I don't really finish a lot of the business books that I read. You know, I kind of read it until I sort of get most of the idea. And I suppose the way that it's written often means that it's going to repeat the core idea, you know, in the next pages that I'm probably not going to get to. So I suppose we're also it is a behavioral thing, but there's also a kind of another force here where a lot of content and a lot of kind of in our constant need for optimization and sort of seeking where people are really kind of engaging, and heat maps and everything else, we're also tuning the way that we create these things so that it will be optimized for the best effects, the best kind of, which is fine, which makes sense. It makes sense to do that, but at the same time, I think it also gives rise to other sometimes more unexpected types of trends or content. For example, look at podcasting, how that has absolutely taken off over the last sort of 10-ish years, across every single, kind of field. And that isn't optimized for length, or, it isn't trying to be a TikTok video of 30 seconds or 60 seconds. It's there to preserve that long form, conversational, almost frictional environment where there's that kind of back and forth conversation, just like you and I are having now. There's sort of 8-10 bits a second. That's not a fast bandwidth, but there's something in working with the friction and the limitation that gives the experience, hopefully, some pleasure and some real value from it. So, yeah, I think that these things can be kind of understood in how we're optimizing for them, but also it does create new pathways, new areas where we can find unexpected bits of content, unexpected value in these new places, which is good.
So let's talk about the impact it might be having on business. I did a bit of research as I sort of start thinking about the show. I start bringing research together and sort of seeing what are the different sides to this. And one of the things I was interested in was what's actually happening in business. So this was something that came out just a few weeks ago. This conference, GPT-0, they found that there are 100 hallucinations, 100 new hallucinations in accepted papers. So these papers had been accepted to this academic conference, and in those papers, they found over 100 hallucinations. So we're finding this making its way into academia. And this is from Stanford. This was some studies that they're doing where they're finding that they can detect AI created content and hallucinated citations in double digits worth of papers. So new academic papers, we're finding that more than 10% of them have got detectable AI generated content and hallucinated citations. Then here, this was a fantastic thing that Deloitte should be deeply, deeply embarrassed about this, where the Canadian government paid them over $1 million for a report. And the report had hallucinated sections in it. So we've got work slop happening here. And Deloitte had done this. They hadn't checked. They still charged the Canadian government over $1 million for it. And well, there we go. It had stuff in it that somebody should have gone to the effort at least of checking before they sent it over. We're finding here as well that we're in the world of law, that we're also getting lots of AI-generated citations and hallucinations in law. This is creating a problem. We're finding it's a problem in corporate communication as well, where there's lots of stuff that's making it out there from companies that is in fact hallucinated. It's not been checked. Then we've got the problem with investments as well, so that some of the information about investments is also made up. All the stuff coming from lawyers that are using citations for cases that don't exist. This is having an impact on business. And what risks are you seeing for companies at the moment when it comes to slop in the workplace? And in the comments, please tell me if you have seen slop in your workplace or in other people's workplace. Have you seen slop that should have been tidied up and just people are putting stuff out and not checking it? Anyway, Alex, what are the risks that you see in business?
Firstly, just a reflection on what you showed us there, and there's tons of those sorts of examples. It's interesting how there's a kind of a human tendency to sort of think that if you can get away with it, you'll have a go. And maybe, sort of putting in some AI generated content in the middle of a medical journal or a legal paper where you think maybe, people aren't paying attention in the way they would, increases the kind of the the amount to which you're going to have a go at trying to kind of just see, well, would they pick it up? So that's an interesting one, and I suppose something worth diving into. In my own work, not just personally as an entrepreneur, content creator, but also I have a kind of a part-time role within a business called the Vuka Group, and I am their head of kind of AI and human enablement. And I'm finding, firstly, the kind of the general strategy and the uptake is actually really good within that business. There's over 100 people in that business. They focus on conferencing and events, and the kind of the ability to really kind of integrate AI in a problem-solving capacity rather than novelty capacity. In other words, it's not about how much, crazy fancy tools I can throw at something, but rather like, I've got a problem. Let's see how I can use AI to help me in, remedying this particular problem is pretty good. So I'm finding that's working well. There is always a little bit of slop, especially when it comes to, an internal company memo or a policy or something. You can easily see that these things are generated. But at the same time, I think that we're going to change. I foresee that a lot of our tolerances around these things are going to slowly become eased and relaxed because there's no getting away from it. Just like, people used to get pissed off when you used to misspell a word when sending text messages.
Yeah.
Now, it's okay. It's fine. We just do it, So it's like language, you sort of adapt to where the usage is. So I think that there's going to be an element of that. However, when something is, there's always that kind of balance with like, it's okay that you used AI, but does it mean that you took no extra time in having a second look at this? Did you literally copy and paste this straight from Gemini? And that's, I think, where people are worried about, where it might not necessarily be slop, but because I think you didn't take any time to really consider what you were doing, I'm automatically putting this into the slop category, and I'm thinking less of you as a teammate or a colleague. So I think that that's part of the impression that I think sometimes needs to be managed there. The good thing is that I think a lot of the time that can be really remedied quite quickly, just Control F, get rid of some of those long M dashes, take away some of those double quotation marks. There's a few easy ways to not just cover your tracks, but I think make it feel like you really have taken a second read through this, because that's where that necessary layer of a little bit of human consideration still is super valuable.
I mean, that kind of stuff, that's kind of the superficial stuff, surely, if we're sort of talking about removing the M dashes and the things that are giveaways for AI. But it's the content itself and the misinformation that ends up wheedling its way in there is the stuff that's harmful. I love this comment here from someone's not quite sure who it is. Again, the system here doesn't always pick up the name. Not only is it about detecting the slop, but how to broach it with a colleague or someone else. I'm concerned about AI shaming. It may be an opportunity to learn, a teachable moment. And I think that this is an important thing. If we spot AI slop, how do we deal with it? How do you speak to someone in a way that doesn't feel as if it's AI shaming or belittling? Because we already know that there is an issue that if it's obvious that someone has used AI, it is reduced in quality. The whole thing's reduced in quality in other people's eyes. And that this isn't even as well. There was a study that came out at the beginning of the year, or I think it was the end of last year, December, that looked at developers and how developers' work was judged when it was seen that AI had been used, and he found that women were judged more harshly than men when it comes to AI use. So there's all sorts of bias that is included in this, not bias that's inherent in the AI, but human bias that comes into this as well. So I guess it's this people thing. How do we broach this with our colleagues?
I think, specifically at an organizational level, I think it's really important for leadership to be able to have a united sort of posture on AI usage in general. Yeah. So for example, and it's funny using the term AI shaming, that it's very evocative, and I can think of a couple examples right away where that would have been the right kind of way to define what was happening. But I think that if leadership can unite on the idea of like, if you're using AI, and you're trying to incorporate it in your workflow, and you're trying to learn from it, and you're trying to just dip your toe in, that's already an advantage. That is a good thing. That's a good thing. And no, don't demonize that, because it's easy for that to be the message. It's easy for that to kind of go, well, don't even go near it if you're not going to sort of use it properly. Experimentation, testing, a little bit of a messy start is what happens. It's what happens when we jump into new technologies, when we started using WhatsApp or email, or it's always going to be the same kind of adoption curve. It's going to be kind of messy, and then a few years later we're going to start to figure it out. So I think that's part of it. At the same time, there's a lot to be said about really sort of pushing for not just team adoption, but individual adoption. And what that means is sort of being able to work out whether it's an AI sort of usage plan or a strategy with a small team, or even at an individual level, and say, okay, what are the current things that you're trying to fix right now? Get better at, speed up, improve, reduce cost on. What are those things? Start with the problems. Start with, what we're actually trying to do. Don't talk about AI yet. Just talk about what you're trying to get right in your role. And then being able to kind of go, okay, well, where can we get curious about some of the possible tools and possible fixes that AI can help to see? Maybe it doesn't make an effect, maybe it does, but embracing the experimentation for what it can give, rather than, oh God, it's just going to be riddled with errors, because then we're missing 100% of the shots we're not taking. So I think changing
So absolutely. I think there's also, when we're looking at AI stuff, the impact that AI is having across a lot of organizations in people's roles is it's changing their roles in a way that doesn't necessarily feel positive to the person. So as somebody who was working in the creative industries, creating stuff was really important to me. And I've got to be honest, when I then became a creative director and people were bringing their work to me, a lot of the time that was quite a demoralizing situation. My job checking work was not something that I particularly found rewarding or valuable to me as a human being. It was an important part of my role, but it was not something that really fed my soul in any way. And that's kind of the way that the AI being incorporated into a lot of workflows is going, is that the work is being done by the AI tools, and then it's up to the human to check what has been done by the AI tools. And when you create something, you get a dopamine buzz, and you get that feeling of satisfaction and that yes kind of moment, that fist pump moment you get of, yes, I did something, I solved that, I did that. When the AI does that, and your job is to select, and most people are really bad at selecting and checking, you don't get that same dopamine moment of having solved something. And I think that most people are particularly bad at selecting and checking. So, and that's the thing that then leads to slop. So are there different skills or different processes or different things we need to do in the workplace to try and make it more rewarding, more enjoyable, get people to understand that this is a vital part of their role, equipping them to do it well? Are there skills that you think that we now need to teach people?
Definitely. And just to agree with you, what the point you made, because it's an important one, a lot of like all technologies, but a lot of what we're seeing is a very uneven distribution of the kind of the pluses and minuses of how AI is rolled out. For example, with developers and software developers, it's great in many ways because it can fast track a lot of the extra kind of coding which would have taken time. Of course, it means that they've got to do exactly the same thing that you mentioned now, where they've got to be able to check, they've got to be able to debug and refactor things. But that does bring that kind of sort of immediate efficiency to it, whereas maybe that's slower or less fulfilling, less rewarding in other more creative applications too. So there's always that slightly uneven way of distributing those kinds of results. Look, I think the answer is absolutely that there is a way to make this feel fulfilling and rewarding, and still have that kind of that option of, or that opportunity to have that dopamine buzz, but also allow the AI to really deliver on what it is there to do in terms of being able to do something faster, make you more productive. I think that a slight kind of sidetrack, but it's important here. I'm a big believer in sort of the power of storytelling and stories as a way to not just, excite and unite people around a common thread, a common theme, or a narrative, but also something that allows us to kind of think in outcomes and think in being able to solve problems. Because when you're solving problems, it's never just one thing. I need to put my shoe on. Okay, I'll put my shoe on. Problem solved. You're thinking of the whole day of all the things that you've got to do, right? I've got to take the car to the mechanic. I've got to have that difficult, meeting with the manager. I've got to do this. I've got to pick up my kids. All of these sorts of things that you've got to do. And you've got to navigate through that day, being able to put different types of bits of energy and concentration into solving different kinds of problems. And so you're still the author, you're still the architect of the day. And I think that's a good way to sort of start in being able to see that, AI is there to kind of be a tool and a companion in various different ways. And you, just like Stephanie said here, you are still responsible for it, right? You're still kind of the overall author of how the story is being told and how the narrative is being told. And if I'm trying to, grow my business unit, or if I'm trying to solve a particular problem or to launch a new product, you've got 700 problems to solve, right? And the AI is only ever going to kind of be able to really be effective at that task level. And you being able to realize that if you can own the outcomes, if you can own the story of where it's going and the directional focus of what it's doing, I think that's where we can not only reclaim that dopamine hit in a much bigger way, but we can achieve bigger things too. And we can do it with a sense of fulfillment and a sense of kind of a creative satisfaction, I think, as well. Not just the thing that I need to do in terms of tasks, but the overall outcome that I'm aiming for. It's really about trying to make us think more strategically. I think that's the real opportunity. And that's where the fix comes from.
Yeah. I think, as we're seeing here, we've got Tim here is saying that, he's as a QA, testing outputs has been my thing forever. And now what's happened is that more people are basically becoming QA. Yeah. As the AI is producing the work, assessing the quality of it is now a vital thing. It's one of the things that I've been talking about a lot over the last year with some of our clients at the Gen AI Academy, is that judgment is possibly the most important thing to be teaching within your organization at the moment. Because when the work is being created and you've got an AI that, like a fire hose, it can spray out 1,000 different variations or ideas in a matter of minutes, then the human's job becomes that QA job of being able to judge and being able to spot what is the thing that best solves this problem. And most people have been pretty bad at judgment, but judgment has now become vital. And, I think sort of looking at slop has always been around. And it comes from a judgment problem. So when I worked in the advertising industry, I would look around and I reckoned that 90% of ads were complete crap. And I think now it's up to 99% of ads are complete crap. And I think that we've got this erosion of judgment. And there was a study again that came out in December that was looking at judgment, and it showed that people who outsource their judgment to AI tools, in fact, damage their own sense of judgment and damage their own confidence in their own opinions. And that, I think, is one of the sort of problems that we have. When judgment crumbles, that's when the crap gets through, because basically you have poked holes in the sieve and lumps are getting through that should never have got through in the first place. And this is the thing that I've been talking to companies about, is how can we improve judgment? And part of it comes from, I think for me, there's two things that we need to look at. One is education, to teach people what good looks like, how to judge, how to give clear feedback. And then the other thing is mentoring from the senior people who have those decades of experience, and having them mentoring the younger people to see what good looks like and how to get there, and to show them that it's something that's important by modeling that. And I think without that, it's just going to, I think a lot of organizations who aren't doing those two things are going to see the judgment lower and the quality of their work drop. And then that is going to have a long-term impact on the company. And that all comes from a myopic focus on trying to make money out of productivity
Totally.
and failing to look after your staff. This is something you're quite passionate about, is the people side of things. Talk a little bit about that, sort of looking after your people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it follows on from what you said about mentorship, actually, because I've seen not only that work well, but I've also seen reverse mentorship work extremely well, where there's a kind of a symbiotic relationship in investing in each other as a mentor or mentee in this case. And in the current business I spoke about right now, I'm seeing that work quite well, because you've got a lot of the younger, more junior people who are jumping into these tools. They're learning faster. They're solving problems more quickly because they've got less to lose, and they've got perhaps more time, a little bit less responsibility. And so they're more open to being mentored, to being guided, but they've also got much more of a better sense of the sort of technical knowledge of how to use some of these tools. They can learn more quickly. They can apply these things more quickly, which makes them a useful mentor in the reverse sense as well. They could be mentoring a leader.
Yeah.
They could be mentoring someone who's in the middle or closer to the top in like, hey, here's a quick tool. I can show you how it works. Don't worry about, watching a 10-minute YouTube video. I'll just show you 30 seconds here, screen share, and now you'll know how to do it. Great. That's super valuable for me as an executive. If I need to be preparing for a presentation, or I'm trying to collate some results from data, instead of trying to kind of trudge along in my way. So I really think that investing in kind of two-way mentorship streets is probably the best way to do it, because not only does everybody get the equal chance to learn and the equal chance to build some respect and some real, kind of relationship credit, if you like, as well. But especially for distributed teams, remote teams, where everyone's busy, everyone's kind of, maybe we only meet in the office once, twice, 3 times a year. That is an incredible relationship builder as well, where I can kind of get a sense of trust. I can come to you with a problem, whether it might be more on the personal side or more on the technical side, and I'm more likely to want to give you a call if I've got something I'm not clear about this. I don't know how to ask the question. Should I use AI? Should I not use AI? I don't know. Let me check in with my mentee. So that's a huge one, and that's a huge one in developing people and allowing people to kind of sort of rise to it. I think that's a big one that we need to also kind of do. There's education. It's funny, some of the things you mentioned about education, you can apply in the same way that it comes to building a good prompt or educating AI in the right way. Show it what good looks like. Show it what crap looks like. Give it context. Give it reference. Be clear. All of these things. These are kind of age-old sort of principles, really. But also something where there's a level of trust in someone's abilities, whether they can do it now or whether they might grow into that role as well. They might grow into, they could have the seeds of something great. They might eventually become a leader. They're not there yet, but you'd want to mentor them. You'd want to kind of, see them grow into that kind of capability that that they could be inhabiting, and talk about a dopamine hit. Talk about something that's rewarding. Developing people. That's why we build communities. That's why we build businesses, aside from making some dough. But we do it because we want to do it with great people. And that matters. I think that matters even more now.
And at that point, it's not just a dopamine hit. You've then got two other really important neurochemicals that you get there. You've got oxytocin, that's a love drug. The fact that you've got a connection with another human, which has been, I think, missing a lot in business in the last 10, 15 years. I believe that we've mentorship is something that is the way that all information has been transferred throughout the history of humanity up until the last 10, 15 years. And we've seen that mentorship has dropped. It has absolutely dropped off a cliff. And a lot of organizations are, as you're saying, expecting people to just look at a YouTube video, just ask ChatGPT about that. And we're losing that mentorship connection in organizations. So that's oxytocin. And then you've got serotonin, which is about cementing your place in the hierarchy and understanding that you are valued. And these are really, really important neurotransmitter chemicals, these sort of happy chemicals that we get. Because dopamine is the one that leads to addiction and all sorts of issues where cortisol then comes in and people get the downer that is associated with that. So you end up with a longing, which is what almost leads to one of the issues that we have with slop, is that people are looking for that dopamine hit of having created something and getting feedback, likes, views, or whatever.
Yes.
Which then, once you've had your dopamine hit, you get your cortisol hit, and you feel as if there's a hole in your life and you need to do it again. And I think that understanding the way the brain works, always bring in my little friend here, understanding the way the brain works. I knew him so well. It's understanding the way the brain works, I think, is a really important thing to understanding how we should be using AI within the workplace. But we have, I can't believe we've been at this for 45 minutes, and it's time for us to wrap it up. And obviously, there's a lot more for us to cover here, and it might be something that we need to return to here, Alex. Because it's obviously that you can see in the comments, there's lots of comments going on there. It's fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for getting involved. Alex, you help organizations with this as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you help and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So there's two kind of main areas that I focus on, and these are also real kind of areas of passion for me. And passion is an important word because, you know, I think that when you can follow something that keeps you alive, that helps to excite some of those important brain chemicals, then that's when the best version shows up. That's when at least for me, I do some of my best work. So I focus on storytelling and sort of narrative development at a leadership level, at an organizational level, to be able to do exactly what I said earlier, to be able to sort of articulate and own the outcomes that we know we want to be able to move towards as a business, as a team, and even at an individual level. So I lead workshops, I work one-on-one with CEOs, with teams around that exact kind of, you know, storytelling around knowledge, around self-leadership, and really about how to communicate and how to do it clearly and effectively. Then the other side of it is around community building. And I've got a real fascination with communities, not just because of what you were saying earlier around being able to use them as mental networks. And I think the real term that you were describing there is tribal knowledge, how for thousands of years we've been able to, you know, communicate super important, you know, lessons and pieces of wisdom that otherwise would have easily been lost, and specific ways of doing things. That's really what knowledge is. It's a way of doing something. And being able to do that in a community environment and to understand what it takes to create and to foster that space, because that's what a community is. It's a space. It's a you know, an environment in which things happen with the right people. Huge area of passion for me, and I've also seen some amazing results when that space is taken care of. And often the best, you know, sort of performing communities are really in business contexts, whether it might be with customers, focus groups, whether it might be learning and development communities within, you know, internal teams. I've seen some amazing stuff. I've seen friendships bloom. I've seen collaborations happen just because people feel heard. They feel like they can belong. They feel like they can discuss and ask hard questions and say difficult things and test the boundaries and ultimately form the level of sort of trust and ultimately dip into some vulnerability so that we can learn things together, we can share the wisdom and move on as a group. So community building is a big one, and that's what I do within Humble Mind, building sort of intimate, proximate communities of influence within businesses. And I have a lot of fun with that. A lot of people have a lot of fun with me too on that. Yeah, so I've got a boot camp running. I do that a couple of times a year where I take them through the principles of community building and what I call social learning. And in fact, we're kicking that off next week. So it's a good time. Next week, Wednesday. And yeah, lots of other services around that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, thank you so much, Alex. It's been a great discussion. And it's something that we will be returning to, I am sure. So thank you everyone who joined us. Thank you everyone who took part in the comments. It's been a phenomenal discussion I've been seeing happening at the side of the screen here. David Hunter, Anna Marie Russionello. I'm sorry, I've pronounced your name absolutely terribly there. Stephanie Moulter, Craig Irons, loads, Gary Ennis, loads of folk getting involved there. Thank you all so much. And we will be back in a couple of weeks, so look out for that. And come and say hello. If you're not already connected with Alex, connect to him. Tell him what you thought of what he was saying. Ask him questions if you've got anything. Give us feedback on this, because we really want to hear if this is valuable to you and how we might be able to make this even more valuable. And I'm going to say I love you all very much. Look after yourself. Go and tell someone you love them. See you soon.
Thanks, mate.